last year's experience where India was leading the G20. How has the experience been this year in Brazil? And there was, of course, the Delhi Declaration. How has the last year been in terms of setting the goals for other countries and other members of the G20?
First of all, let me say that India's G20 was very unprecedented and historic. It was historic because India made it from G20 to G21 by including African Union as a member. Secondly, our declaration was very ambitious, very progressive, very forward-looking, and it was widely appreciated by all the leaders of G20. And thirdly, we did it very differently from any other country by taking it all over to every state and union territory of India and making it a mass movement. The Brazilian presidency has just got over, and I would say that as a member of the Troika, India assisted and supported them. Frankly speaking, I would say that it lacked ambition. Their only ambition was to have an alliance on hunger and poverty, which they managed to achieve, and India supported them in that. But I think there could have been much greater ambition towards climate, towards energy transition, towards growth, strong sustainable growth, which is very critical. These are critical because global growth is at its lowest right now, at about 3%, lowest since the turn of the century. And while the developed world is growing at 1.8%, the global south, lower and middle income countries are growing at 4.4%. And this is going to be the story for the next 3 decades, according to IMF and World Bank, that emerging markets will grow at a much faster pace because of young demographics. The population in India, Asia, Africa will be very young, whereas the population across Europe and America will be aging. And therefore, these countries will grow at a much, much higher pace. And that is very critical. And the second point, which is very important, is the global debt. The global debt is very, very high. If you look at the global south, there are 15 countries which spend more on debt than on education. There are 44 countries which spend more on debt, on their interest payment on debt. The interest payment is higher than what they spend on health. And therefore, there is a need for greater debt transparency, and there's a need for debt restructuring of the global south.
Right.
And those are issues which should be brought center stage,
right,
which we hope to do in South Africa now.
Absolutely. How much more difficult is it to arrive at a consensus on a global platform such as this in today's world, given that, we had at the time of the Delhi Declaration, the Middle East crisis was not there, the world literally standing divided. Is it far more challenging in today's world to arrive at a consensus in that context?
So there are many challenges. First and foremost, we must understand there is a global challenge of a crisis in the heart of Europe. There is a raging war for over 3 years now in the heart of Europe. We should also be very clear that World War I was fought in Europe, the World War II was fought in Europe, and we have this war going on for 3.5 years. You have a huge humanitarian crisis in the Middle East. More people have died in the Middle East in 1 year than what they've died in the Russia-Ukraine crisis over 3.5 years. So you have a Middle East crisis. And then you have a challenge now in Syria. So you have all these challenges.
Right.
Secondly, you have a very major challenge in terms of global value chains having broken. So you've seen United States putting 100% duty on Chinese automobiles, 50% duty on batteries, etc. And Europe has also moved forward and put a 45% duty on imports from China on automobiles. And this duty is being put because they say that China is overproducing for the world and is supported, their production is based on support by the government subsidizes their production, and therefore they are producing below market costs. And what you will see is more trade wars. So that is the second crisis. And the third crisis, to my mind, is the crisis of new productive forces of artificial intelligence, generative AI, quantum computing. These have the opportunity to enhance production, productivity, transform lives of citizens in education, health, nutrition, many areas. But they also have the potential to trigger conflict among societies. And therefore you need international regulation so that they can grow in a manner that these new technologies benefit humanity and benefit society.
Right. You spoke about this very important issue of tariffs, and with Trump coming in, there's a lot of rhetoric surrounding that. How is India, poised to look at this in terms of opportunities and challenges? Because right now the focus appears to be China. Is India in a more advantageous position, would you say?
I think India is in a hugely advantageous position because we should really try and take full advantage of this, because irrespective of changes of government, there is a belief that it's a very significant belief that India has to work with the United States and the United States has to work with India. And that gets reflected in the fact that we have a partnership in the Quad, and we are doing many things together in climate, in energy transition, in critical materials, and you saw this agreement on critical minerals, and then we had the India-Middle East Economic Corridor, IMEC, which was done during G20. So many areas, including Biofuel Alliance. All these are key areas where India is working with the United States. Also, it's important to understand that there is only one country in the world which has retained its market share at about 26% of the global GDP for the last 3 decades. Governments may come, governments may go, but United States has retained its market share at 26% of the global GDP. It has a 44% market capitalization of the world with just 4% of the population. And it's the only country. Europe's share has fallen from 30% to 18%, but America has retained it. It's also important for us to understand that countries like Japan, which grew from a post-World War II, Korea, recent time China, all have grown at high rates on the back of penetrating United States as far as exports are concerned. And therefore this relationship, to my mind, is very critical for India to be able to grow into a fully developed economy and becoming a Viksit Bharat by 2047.